Jason Cercone, it's a pleasure to have you here today on the Simplifying Entrepreneurship Podcast.
Pete, I'm glad to be here with you, my friend. This is a great show. You're doing some great work here. I'm glad to be here with you talking today.
Awesome. We're going to talk some branding. We're going to talk some podcast. We're going to talk all sorts of things around how you can be better in your business. And I think that's part of what we do here every episode of Simplifying Entrepreneurship. So let's dig right into it, Jason. Give us a little bit of background. We won't spend the whole episode, but a
Mhm.
little bit of background on this idea around how you can build authority and how you can use podcast platform around your marketing as a central piece.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is looking for that cutting edge, innovative way to market their brand, to build awareness, to get more people to look at what they're doing. And with the meteoric rise that the podcast medium has experienced over the past
Yeah,
several years, it gives the perfect stage because in today's world, what really sells people is a good story. And a podcast is the ultimate stage for telling
yeah,
a good story and having a great conversation. And when you do that in a compelling way, it makes people aware of who you are, what you do, and ultimately how you can help them solve a problem. Many podcasts are specific to a niche or an idea, and people tune into it for that reason. So if
yeah.
you can lend your expertise to those types of podcasts, people are going to start to hear your message and say, this is a very wise individual. It would be smart of me to follow up with them to see what else they can do for me. So they will follow a call to action and jump over to your website or wherever you send them, which is a big part of how you do a good podcast guesting campaign is how you capture that person after you've captivated them. But overall, this medium gives you so many opportunities to connect with people that are in your arena and tell them a great story and show them what kind of value you have to offer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, what would you tell somebody that's, hasn't been on a podcast as a guest before? And, I'm sure they're frustrated or maybe nervous about it, or if they're not even used to sort of giving their spiel.
Mhm.
Where do you start, Jason, with this stuff?
Well, pick up the phone and call me. No, I'm kidding. I don't. I don't want to violate one of the big rules because you don't go on podcasts to sell. You go on podcasts, like I said, tell a good story, provide value. And what I really think it comes down to is you have to take that leap.
Yeah,
And once you get in front of a microphone, if you've never done it before, it's one of those things that you just have to experience and see what happens. Tell your story, connect with the host, come into it with the mindset of having a good conversation. That's really all I'm showing up to do today is
yeah,
have a good conversation, make sure that it flows. You don't try to dominate the microphone. You have a good back and forth. And that type of attitude and that type of approach is going to rub off on the audience because people tune into shows because they get value from them and they keep
for
coming
sure.
back because that value is good for their world. So if you're a part of that, that's what could lead to the next step. But you'll never know unless you take that first step yourself and just get on the microphone and tell your story and get better at telling it. The more interviews you do, the more natural this becomes and the more value you're going to be able to provide to those new audiences that you connect with.
Yeah, I agree. And just for those listening out there, I mean, a year ago, I didn't have a podcast and
Yeah.
I was nervous about those same sort of things. And as a guest, I had only guested at that time before I launched my own podcast, probably on, two or three podcasts.
Mhm.
And over this last year, released 50 some episodes now and have been a guest on over 90. And
That's great.
it's been, yeah. And I've watched, here's some of the benefits that I've seen. I've watched my authority, on all the social channels definitely go up. And if
Mhm.
you search my name, if you search my business, because of all of the algorithms out there of everybody's podcast and they're putting my name and my business within those,
Mhm.
now there's video out there, there's audio out there, there's imagery out there,
Yeah.
all that comes back to my business. So from
Mhm.
that, and me personally, so for those people that have personal brands and those people that want to explore the benefit of that through their business, I can say from firsthand experience that this is something that really works, doesn't it, Jason?
You hit the nail right on the head. I mean, with the number of different platforms that are available for people to find you, with podcast guesting, one of I don't want to call it an overlooked benefit, but it's definitely something we need to be talking about with the volume turned all the way up, are the SEO benefits that you get
Yeah.
from a valuable guesting campaign. Because every time you provide a link to your website, the link will then be placed in the show notes. And those show notes could be on a very high authority website. If it's on the podcast's separate website, that could be high authority. And every time you have a backlink generated from all these high authority websites, that's going to tell Google, well, this is a high authority site too that people need to be seeing more of. So they start to give you more visibility in those organic rankings. That is huge. And that can benefit you so much in so many different ways. And you also mentioned social media, having
Yeah.
all of those different assets available in clips that people will do. They'll take video clips for reels and for YouTube shorts and pull actual segments from the show to make
For
YouTube
sure.
videos out of. Having that presence all over the internet is going to make you more accessible, and it's going to make people take notice because they keep seeing you pop up everywhere. Now your reputation is through the roof. And when that happens, people are coming to you in droves because they want to be a part of that too. They see the value that you provide to the world. Now, how can they experience that on a higher level?
And it all starts with a conversation, right? Like,
100%.
it's amazing how much content can be created off one simple conversation. And,
That's
you
right.
know, even as a guest, I look at it from a host perspective, but as a guest perspective, um, I am so grateful that all of the people that have had me on their podcast, they send out all this information. Typically, just to give our audience an idea, most often the host will send you back all of the information you ever need to post that stuff. They'll send you
Certainly.
YouTube clips, they'll send you all of these things, they'll send you slicks to post on social media
Mhm.
already done for you, even so
Yep.
that you don't even have to do them, because that's part that they usually do as the host. So from that side of things, it's really your commitment is, for the most part, having a conversation. And if you can get over that idea of, I just have to have a conversation, and why is it fairly easy to have a conversation? Well, it's fairly easy because you're the expert on it. So the
Yeah.
conversations usually come fairly easy for the guest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's for me with the training program that I offer. I try to cover the anatomy of a podcast and help the guest understand what it's all about from the podcaster's perspective and what they're ultimately trying to create.
Yeah.
I think that gives more knowledge into the whole process, ultimately raising that buy-in that a guest is going to have from this piece of content.
Yep.
Because one of the biggest frustrations that a podcaster has is when they share all this great content and the guest does nothing with it.
Hmm.
They don't share anything. And then that all often leads to the guest saying, well, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Podcast guesting did nothing. Well, of course, it's not going to work if you don't do something with that great content that someone poured hours into creating for you. If you actually utilize all of those assets, you can really gain a ton of visibility. So, having an understanding of how this process works, and Pete, as a podcaster and a podcast guest, you know how both sides of this work.
For
Folks
sure.
that are coming into this just looking to make an impact as a guest can absolutely make that happen. But as a podcaster myself, I firmly believe having an understanding of how this whole process works gives them more insight and therefore more buy-in to get those results that they seek.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, Jason. Uh, how can a person benefit immediately from making a guest appearance on a podcast?
That's a tremendous question, and it's another one of those powerful approaches and slash initiatives that comes from this whole process that sometimes gets overlooked. It's This is one of the most powerful networking platforms on the planet today. And you think of how the pandemic changed everything in regards to how we communicate and this digital back and forth where Pete, you're where you are and I'm where I am, and
Yeah.
we're connecting to have this great conversation and ultimately have something that we can share with our audiences that are they're really going to get something from. We don't have
Yeah.
to be in the same room for that anymore. So having that ability to connect with someone, have that conversation, you get to create great content, which then will get shared and put out into the world for everybody to consume. There's so much power and value in doing that. And it's become more normal to network in this fashion
Yeah.
through the computer. So once you have that conversation, after the interview's over, typically what happens, and this can even happen beforehand, you're BSing back and forth and sharing ideas and talking about things that you're doing. And if you do a good job and you help that podcaster create content that they can truly utilize and they know they're going to knock it out of the park and give their audience something that they'll truly enjoy, they'll do a ton of selling for you. They'll put you over with that audience and say, yes, Pete is the resource that you need in your life. Look at the value he brought to the show today. Connect with him to learn more. So you don't have to sell in that respect. So there's one way immediately that you're going to start to benefit. So if there's a live stream that goes along with it, that could be heard the second the interview is happening. Another good way to benefit before the interview goes live is to offer an affiliate program. If you have an offer, a service, a product that perhaps could be valuable to that audience, they may want to promote it for you right on the spot, and they may work it into the next week's podcast. They may put it on their social media. But if you don't ask those questions, you'll never know. So doing this up front and having these types of conversations, but ultimately knowing what you're there for, everything that you do has to be rooted in value. If you show up to a podcast as a guest and your plan is to just sell, that's really not going to get over because the audience is not going to get any value from that. They're going to feel like they listen to an infomercial.
Yeah.
And that's if the host even puts the episode out. Because if you spend the whole time as a salesperson, they might say, my audience is going to hate this. I'm not going to share it.
Yeah.
So giving yourself the opportunity to say, listen, now that you've got some value from this, are you willing to promote what I do to your audience? Or maybe you did such a good job, they may need what you have to offer.
Exactly.
And they may say, hey, look, let's talk about this. Or I actually have some people in my circle who have needed this. Let me connect you with them. So you have to show up with value. And when you do that, those types of opportunities will present themselves.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, our time's coming to a close, Jason, and I absolutely want to let our audience know how to get a hold of you and learn more about your program around guesting and being a guest on podcast. I mean, I've just got to reiterate again, after being on over 90 podcasts in the last year as a guest, I cannot believe the cool people that I've met, the awesome conversations that I've had, the benefit in the raise of my visibility online, and just so many great things have come from it. So I can certainly recommend to any of our listeners here, if it's something you've been thinking about, then re-listen to this episode and have a chat with Jason. So Jason, tell them how to get a hold of you and talk to them a little bit about your podcast guesting program.
Yeah, my program's called Guest Accelerator, and what we do is we really work through all of the strategies and methods that it takes to get maximum ROI from your podcast guesting efforts. So we're going to cover a lot of the, like I said before, getting into what a podcast is all about and having a true understanding of how this medium works and what it can bring you, which will
Yeah.
help you set up realistic goals and expectations. And then we start working on the fundamentals of making sure you're telling your story with confidence and with power in a compelling fashion that ultimately makes you someone that people are attracted to. And we spend time talking about the art of conversation because that's what podcasting is all about, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then we start to get into the functions that make the machine go, all of these little working pieces that ultimately will make things go forward and bring you the results that you're seeking. So we work together on this one-on-one, really getting granular with it, because my thought is if you're going to be a podcast guest, you need to understand how it can work for you. And it makes no sense to waste your time spraying and praying and trying to get on any possible show with no clear direction on what you want to accomplish. If you truly want to build your brand, doing it through the podcast medium is entirely possible, but you have to understand how to do it right. And that's where I take great pride in showing everybody the steps that not only that I've put into action for or within the course, but I actually use them myself as I build my brand
For
to
sure.
be on podcasts and serve as a guest that provides value to each audience. So best way to connect with me would be go to jasoncercone.com/simplifying entrepreneurship. And I'll have a special message and a gift waiting for you there. So come check that out. And then we can take it from there. And I look forward to sharing how this podcast medium can really be a game changer for you and your brand.
Sweet, sweet. Well, thanks so much for spending some time with me, Jason. We'll certainly put all those in the show notes. And I really appreciate the time that you spent with me being my podcast guest today here on the Simplifying Entrepreneurship Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Pete. It's been a blast.
All right, man. Make it a great day.